Well, hi, everybody watching this interview today. Thanks for joining us. I want to welcome two of my favorite people that I love and enjoy and respect. First, Representative Ron Noble. Ron is in his second term as the state representative here in Oregon. He's also 6 years out, retired from being police chief in McMinnville after a 28-year career in law enforcement. I believe that was all here in Oregon, right, Ron?
Yes, it was.
Okay, and Ron is also the husband of another one of our favorite people, Sue. They together have 5 children, 7 grandchildren, and are in process of adopting another child, which would be super fun sometime to just do a whole nother interview with you and Sue on your choice.
We'd love to
do that. Okay, let's plan on that. And then
he'll be 80 when the kid graduates high school.
Age is just a number.
Close.
Just a number. If it doesn't, what do they say? If you don't mind, it doesn't matter. So I think they're good. So, and then I want to welcome Fred. Fred is just 2 years retired from a 40-year career, Youth for Christ here in Portland, and I think it's so appropriate that he's got the city of Portland as his background, because for so many years he was known as probably one of the most connected people in Portland. Everybody knew who Fred Douglas was. We couldn't even have an argument out in public without somebody walking up to us to say hi to Fred. So if you don't know, many of you do, Fred is my husband of 27 years and the father of our 2 biracial sons, both adults and in their 20s. So you guys, first, tell the people listening how you two know each other. How long have you known each other? Tell us a little bit about that connection.
Well, I got to thinking about it, and I don't know exactly when Ron and I met, but when we became roommates, it was 41 years ago.
Wow. Okay.
And he was 20 and I was 23.
So you're older than Ron.
Yeah, we had a term of endearment for him. We called him Young Pup. Now I wish he was older and he can call me that. But I'm not exactly sure. You might have been 19 when I first met you, whenever you and Sue started dating.
Yeah, I think I was 19.
Yeah.
Wow. So what do you remember about that, Ron?
Well, I think the connection was now mother-in-law, who also worked for Youth for Christ at the time.
Right.
I was in between, left Oregon State, moving up to Portland, work for ODOT, and I think she kind of saw the writing on the wall and wanted me to be with someone that she trusted.
Oh, okay.
Kind of brought us together, but
awesome.
it's 40 years or 41 years that since we roomed together. And, like any other long-term relationship, there's times in our lives where we've been more connected and times less connected. And sure appreciated you sending your boys to Linfield College here in McMinnville, the way for us to get reconnected again.
That was really fun, and we sure appreciated your presence on that campus during a couple of rough years there. So that. Well, you guys, we could spend hours talking, and it would be really fun. I do that. We'll catch up over dinner again sometime. But for today, I want to just jump right into the topic, talk a little bit, have some dialogue around the current tension, the ongoing tension between African Americans and the police. Let me say, as we walk this out, I know one of the things that Fred has said to me repeatedly, he doesn't speak for African Americans. He's just sharing his piece, his perspective, his story. And Ron, you probably would say the same thing. You don't necessarily speak for all men and women in blue, but you bring a perspective. Both of you guys, decades of service to our community in different realms. And I think it's another Denise invited you a couple of years ago after the event in Ferguson with the death of Michael Brown. she invited you guys into one of her classrooms. She's a professor at Linfield, and had you then talk about some of the racial tensions and the tension between police. So that's really what gave me the idea, and would just want to bring you guys into this. And I'm just going to jump into some questions. Fred, we'll start with you. You, I know, have had some interesting encounters with police in your lifetime, many. And I'm just going to ask you, just share from your perspective one or two of those and how it impacted you.
Okay, I think the first one I think of actually involved you too. We were in our first or second year of marriage. We were living down in Portland, and one day we were driving up Interstate 84 towards I-205, and a Portland police officer was in the outside lane flying by us. He suddenly hit his brakes, slowed down, pulled up behind us, and I said to you, okay, he's checking out the brother and the blonde. And you were kind of puzzled. We got off of 84 on the 205 heading south, and after so long, he got off at a ramp, went over the bridge, and went back to go back to 84 because he was done reading whatever was on my record, that he was wondering if I had one or not. And that was first time you were with me to see the kind of things that can happen. But probably one more recent was about a year before I retired from YFC. I was in a suit and tie, went to the bank to make a deposit for all of the donations we had that day. And on my way out, I got in my car and I was surrounded by several police officers with their hands on their holsters. And they asked me to not start the car. And the long story short was they saw me as a potential suspect who was attempting to rob the bank earlier, but ran out. And after about 15, 20 minutes, whoever they were looking for, they captured him and they let me go. But as I was driving by, I could see the police officers. They were handcuffing the young man. And keep in mind, I'm 6'2", and I'm black. He was about 5'9", and he was white. And I was wearing a suit and tie, and he was wearing a sweatshirt and jeans. And there was such a stark difference, but somehow I became a suspect. And I thought, man, this isn't right. So.
Okay. So, and how did that impact you, Fred? I mean, that particular day, that I think was one of the more serious ones. It felt serious to us.
Initially, I did a Fred Douglas. I laughed, but it was more like a sarcastic laugh. And then it got me churning inside. But then I just thought, well, thank goodness they only had their hands on their holsters and they didn't have them withdrawn. But it's kind of a weird thing to think that 4 guys are around you and they all got their hands on their guns. And it took me a while to process that and just kind of let it go.
Okay. So Ron, I know I've given you some questions I'm going to ask, but I want you, if you want to respond at any time to something that Fred is saying, go ahead. My question for you at this point, and then you can do both, is when you were police chief, what were your policies? What did you stress? What was your training with your officers in working with diversity? How do you train?
At first, I think now's a good time to comment. I've known Fred for over 40 years, and I'm finding even through the last couple of weeks and even today, learning more about my friend that I had no idea that he would go through. And it's a reminder that we all have stories, and even friends have stories, and we don't always know. And I think, I'm saying that because I think that's kind of at the base of what we're experiencing is we don't give people grace. We don't understand where they're coming from. So, one of the most important decisions I made as a police chief and training is important, but one of the most important things was actually selecting and hiring the right people that we would put our trust in. And you know, what happens at the Public Safety Academy, the department policies we write, training and education and discipline are all important. But you have to make the right decision first. And like other professions, police officers have to meet minimum regular continuing education or continuing training in order to keep their certificates. And that includes on you know, different cultures and diversity. Proudly, I think our department generally surpassed those minimum requirements. But you know, my sense is that it doesn't mean anything if the character of the people you're training isn't right. You know, if you're training and providing education to someone who never should have put the badge on to begin with, or maybe they haven't been their experiences, we haven't attended to their experiences and some of the trauma that they've lived through. So emotionally, they know capable of carrying the badge, then it doesn't matter. And I think, and I'm saying that because I think that's where we are today, in that a whole lot of information, a lot of evidence-based, we have a lot of resources with cultural diversity and training, but the reality is a matter of the heart. And what we've done, it's actually pretty recent. You would think, I mean, I didn't even know this through 2 different police agencies because we did psychological evaluations, we did thorough background checks. Even with that, we make mistakes. But there were agencies, even within this state, who were not doing that until in 2019 that requires a psychological evaluation to people that we give a firearm to, and we give them the authority to essentially take somebody's constitutional freedom away for violating society's rules. So I think there's better, we can do more, we do a better job of vetting people to ensure that they are qualified. We provide them the resources they need when they do experience some trauma, and then figure out a way to make sure that we can, I guess for lack of a better, rid ourselves for those that violate our trust. And I bring that up. This is not a campaign thing at all, but actually we've had discussions over the last couple of days, a couple of us who have tried this and are going to retry again. Right now, law enforcement officers are held to the same employment standards from a discipline and discharge, the same employment standards as any other employee in any other industry in the state of Oregon. So we have a high expectation of behavior and competency, yet we have a least common denominator when it comes to actually getting rid of the bad apples, so to speak.
Okay.
So I your question, but it's been near to my heart for the last couple of days.
Well, thank you for sharing your heart, Ron. I appreciate that. And thank you for having that kind of heart. I think that is one of our concerns, and we recognize that. We can complain about police, we complain about politicians, we complain about pastors, and wonder, it would be almost, we just think it would be easier if we just get the right training or do the right policies, it'll all magically work out. But you're exactly right. It is a matter of the heart. And people come into their profession with so much already set that I understand the difficulty that you face in that. Well, Ron, let me ask about your time when you served as I believe, a police officer and a detective in Corvallis for a lot of years. What perhaps were some of your concerns, your fears, your frustrations around the tension between the races and the police?
You know, I learned a lot. I grew up in Southern California and then went to high school in the small town of Dallas here in Oregon, and went to college up in Seattle. So I had some exposure to urban and rural life. But I'm finding, and especially looking back, there are times in my life where I discovered or was exposed to racism. Mind you, I've never experienced it, but I became aware of it. And it was no different than when I became a police officer in Corvallis. Corvallis has advocates for everybody. But I think the bigger lesson I learned right off the bat was being in a major university town. We recruited students from all over the United States, both urban and rural, and actually in other countries. People brought their experiences, specifically with law enforcement, to Corvallis. And whether that was good or bad, that was laid on, I guess, us as well. So we had to learn, I think to be good, you had to learn how to keep the peace, provide calmness, de-escalate situations, enforce the law, yet give grace to someone's experience in another location with law enforcement at the same time, and trying to be safe with all that. If someone came from a different part of the country and their experience with urban policing, it was totally different than Corvallis. And so in a way, quite honestly, I think I learned some ways to, you learn how to give a person grace. You learn how to try to understand what they're saying. You don't have to agree, but if you can somehow see the situation through their eyes, that gives you a basis, which for maybe some restoration and maybe even a relationship down the road. Not that you have to agree, but it provides a foundation. And I think those are the skill sets I hope I picked up in Corvallis. I guess one of the times, both in Corvallis and in McMinnville, I always wanted, especially as a police chief, I wanted when a police car drove through a neighborhood, I wanted there to be a sense of safety, that there was comfort. And the reality is, whether it was in McMinnville, Corvallis, or I'm sure anywhere else, that's not the case. There's either a fear of, or there's just a sense of alarm. What's going on in my neighborhood? And the fear could either be from an outside influence that the police are there for, or the police themselves. And I think that's tragic, because the whole sense of having a group of individuals that we ask to provide some safety and security for all of us should provide a sense of comfort by their presence, not a sense of fear.
It certainly should. And I think we would all love if we could lean more into that very thing. And I guess that's one of the questions I want to ask today is how we can do that. Last night we were watching the news, and at the close of it, they showed police officers and African Americans connecting, linking arms, marching together with banners. They were standing in solidarity together, enjoying each other's presence. And I just wonder it feels like we'd have to make a huge push in that direction to just lean hard into people who can do that. So Fred, let me bring you back into this conversation. Obviously we've raised two sons of color, and they've had their own perspective and their own experiences along the way. I just wonder what you, Fred, would say to young Black men who have experienced perhaps some confusion, they're hurt, they're frightened, they're not sure what to do about the current violence and injustice that African Americans have long endured. At 63 years old, what wisdom do you have to share with those guys?
You mean besides don't grow old?
Well, we actually do want them to grow old. The alternative, true. Yeah.
I meant mentally.
Okay.
I thought about that when you told me what you might ask me. First and foremost, things have changed so much that what we used to tell people sometimes doesn't work anymore. And I think Ron hit on it because of character issues in various officers. But it used to be, look, smile, cooperate, use good grammar. We tell them all these things so the officer will treat you like you're a normal human being. Don't slur your words, don't get agitated, and all these things.
Don't wear hoodies.
Yeah, but now people who are doing all the right things are that's happening to them. So I would just say what I mainly try and get across to people is try and take charge of the atmosphere of the situation. If you can somehow turn it into a positive encounter, even though it's a negative situation, if you can influence the officer or officers enough that they see that you're trying to be civil with them, hopefully they will be civil towards you. I've had both types of officers that I've dealt with.
Sure.
Uh, the ones that have their act together are really appreciative of my willingness to interact with them intellectually, or emotionally, spiritually, whatever. And the ones who just wanted to show me who the man was and who was in charge, they would actually, some of them would back off. Others of them, they would start thinking about what they're doing, because they know at some point, if they mess with me, I must have enough going on that I know how to do the proper things with authority later, whether it take them to court or whatever it is. They kind of back off. But I would say the number one thing is to do the things that will help you survive.
Mhm.
And it's not always running. It's not always fighting back. It's trying to defuse the situation.
Okay. Okay. Thank you for that. Fred, let me stay with you just for a moment. I wonder how your faith through all these decades, through these years, have shaped your understanding and come alongside of you to strengthen you to deal with the racism of your 63 years. You've obviously lived this a long time. How has faith made a difference for you? How does that help your understanding of life and race?
I attribute a lot of that to my parents.
Mhm.
Uh, they instilled in us as kids that we should never walk away from God, no matter what we go through. And we understood that our security was not being alive forever. It was that our security was in Christ, regardless of where we end up. That's helpful. So you may be afraid of the situation, but you're not fearful of death, because you know ultimately you'll be with your Savior. Um, on top of that, my faith sometimes has caused me to be able to look at people with a little bit of grace. And sometimes I feel bad for people, even though they're doing what they're doing to me. I'm not going to equate myself with Jesus, who even said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do, while he was on the cross. But you can look at somebody and you could just tell this person is screwed up. And so I try and have compassion. But there are moments when there is no compassion. I'm not going to sit here and try and be a complete saint. But the longer you're around, the more you see. And the older you get, the more you encounter it.
And Fred, I would give witness to that. I think that you are a man of peace at your core. I have seen you, and I know just a little bit I've interacted with Ron. Both of you guys are men of grace because you walk with the Savior, and you're exactly right. It always, well, I shouldn't say always, but a majority of the time can diffuse an aggressive situation, a negative situation. I've certainly seen you offer more grace to people than I want to in the moment because of a racist comment, an ignorant comment, that kind of thing. So thank you for that.
One of the things my parents used to always say to us is, you don't have to stoop to their level. You want to bring them up to yours.
Okay. Well, thank you for doing that. And Ron, I would ask you to talk a little bit about your faith and also about, what you want to say to the men and women in blue. This is not an easy time, and it's so unfair when one profession gets a bad rap because of what a few people in their profession have their behavior. So what would you say?
Yeah, I appreciate you saying that, because I do believe the bulk of the men and women who
We do too.
put on a badge truly are people of character and do the right thing. But what I would say is this, um, this comes just watching policing as we've been through the last decade. Um, if you're going to keep doing it, stay true to your calling. Understand. I have a little bit different view, and so I'm not speaking for all law enforcement. Fred's
Right.
qualifier. From my perspective, understand that the correct response to Black Lives Matter is not the Blue Lives Matter or that all lives matter. The correct response is yes, they do. And so let's work together to cause reform to truly protect and serve all people. And the other thing I would add to that is that to people who are in law enforcement, the stakes are too high.
Yeah.
If a police officer cannot commit to this, cannot commit to the task of working together and understanding, to ridding our ranks of people who should no longer be in law enforcement, then it's time to step down. It's okay, get out and leave, because the stakes are really too high. Either you're all in and you understand that this is something we need to work through as a society, that it's okay to have reforms. In fact, it's required, that we need to start working together. We need to give each other grace. And right now, the first move really needs to be in the realm of police and making an effort. But if they don't have the capacity anymore, it's time to get out, so nobody gets hurt.
Okay.
With faith, my wife is writing a blog, and I was a guest writer this week, and I'm going to borrow one of my own quotes. And part of it has to do with politics and government, because that's what I'm doing. When we're at our best, disagreement is good. Healthy disagreement, debate, iron, collaboration, and compromise. But when we're at our worst, it's ugly, it's polarizing. We vilify each other, and it's a lot of divisive activity. At its extreme, we lose friends, families separate, and then people get hurt. Important as all of this is, and this is my way of looking at it, from law enforcement to working in state government, is important, and I believe it is important, otherwise I wouldn't put my time and effort into it. But as important as it is, it pales in comparison to the kingdom of God. And we are all created in his image. Black, brown, white, every nationality, every skin tone, male and female, we together make up the image of God. If we aren't all together, then the image of God is not complete. So I just believe that there is still hope. There is still a reason for us to be engaged, because he is a God of restoration.
Amen. Well said. Thank you for sharing that. Appreciate it. Let me just share this story. I feel like we've kind of covered it, but just from a perspective of a wife and a mother, just for those who would be listening who have no clue what it is to either be a person of color or to be a wife or mother of someone in color. A couple of years ago, Fred and I were out at the Starbucks by the airport with another couple. They were both white, our friends, dear friends of ours. And we went out, we were going to go out and sit outside of that area in their seating area. And my friend and I were walking ahead of the guys, and we opened the doors. And when we did, there were like 20 police officers out there in that courtyard. And it startled both of us, because you just see this sea of blue, and they look so professional, and there they are with their guns and everything. And her immediate response, which she verbalizes, "Wow, I guess we're going to be safe this morning." And it was just that moment. I think I just need people to hear, a lot of us don't feel that way, because in that moment, I went, wow, our worlds are really different. Because first becoming a wife to an African-American man, and then having two sons that I adore, because when I opened that door and saw the sea of blue, and I don't like it this way, I wish it wasn't true, but my anxiety went through the roof. anytime I'm with Fred or our sons and we are around, we encounter the police. And while, yes, we have friends, many friends who are great and police officers and love Fred, love our boys, when I encounter a police officer that they don't know who we are, I don't know that they will love Fred or Eric or Brian. My anxiety is so high because exactly what you said earlier, Ron. I don't know their character, and they have a gun strapped to their waist. So if people could even just hear that, I grew up with much more positive feelings around police, but boy, my world is different now. And some people never taste that. And I think just as you've said, listening to one another's stories, stepping back and realizing there are people walk in different set of shoes than we do. And and I don't understand what on earth it's like to go out every day with a gun strapped to my waist and have to make life and death decisions either. So there's just so many stories that we could share with one another. And here, I just wonder if there's a forum of some kind that would improve relations for all of us. Any thoughts on that, Ron and Fred? You both could speak into that. What do you think could help?
I appreciate you bringing up the character thing because your friend, I guess I would speak and come back around. This is the systemic part of it. Your friend believes in the system, that the decision of the police chief and the process that keeps officers healthy produces persons of character. But there's another group that is suspect of the character. And as a former police chief, that hurts me or that saddens me because I want to ensure that anybody could believe in the department that I ran. And I think there's some things we need to do systemically to make that happen so that when people walk into the city of Portland, regardless of their background, regardless of their experiences, at someday I would love them to be able to say, these are all men and women of character. And I think that's part of the problem. You mentioned the news last night where we watched African Americans and white police officers arm in arm. I would hope that's the beginning, and maybe that white police officer and then African American actually exchange names, and there's a beginning of relationship and a foundation there that they haven't had before. Because it's going to be, to quote one of my favorite people right here, Fred, it's one person at a time.
Yeah, and I would echo that too. And I think coming from the other side, because unfortunately, one side is in control of the situation more than the other. When I don't stop a police officer, they stop me. And the truth is, I've been very fortunate. Part of it is, particularly in the Clackamas area, most of the officers know who I am because you spend as many years working with kids. And in certain areas of Portland, where Portland police officers know, and I've done funerals and services for some of their officers, so they kind of know who I am. But there's always going to be that one rogue person. And it's not always the small town cop way out in the boonies. They're right here in the city. But you're so right about the character issue. But being on the other side, the things that I can control is my own character. The things I can control is what I'm doing and when I'm doing it. Now, simply going to the bank and having that happen, there's nothing I can do about that. But my dad used to tell us as kids growing up, if we weren't home by 11:30, we got in trouble. And I'm not trying to dictate when people be home, but he always told us nothing good happens after 11:30. And I can remember we ran out of gas once. He goes, what time was it? It was about midnight. Didn't I tell you nothing good happens after 11:30? But that's so much of it for me in my upbringing was what my parents instilled in me. And then sadly, one of the things I had to learn to do is be bilingual. And when I say bilingual, what I mean by that is, you know, I may talk one way when I'm hanging with the brothers, but when I'm with a police officer, I got to be able to speak in a language he understands, which is a male white type of environment, because he's not going to necessarily know what I'm talking about if I'm using slang. Um, and and that's the unfortunate thing, is so much is riding on us to be responsible for us to survive.
Mhm.
But if you don't understand that, your chances of survival go down. I'm not saying it's right. That's the reality. So you have to do what you have to do to survive.
So learning a skill set is important, isn't
Yeah.
it? And every day we step outside of these doors. Well, you guys, any closing thoughts before? I just want to thank both of you. You have both spent decades serving our communities, and we owe a debt of gratitude to both of you. Appreciate you guys. Any closing thoughts as we wrap up today?
You know, Denise, I really appreciate being invited to do this. As you mentioned, I had forgotten about the time you and I, Fred, joined Denise Baird's class at Linfield to talk about Michael Brown and the tragedy there in Ferguson. You know, I would love to do this more often. I would prefer to have a different topic. And someday our society can move beyond, you know, African American relationships, and maybe we can be all on the same page and spend times doing something different. But until then, I absolutely think that we need a change in the way we do things. I don't know what that looks like, and I can't see the change from Fred's eyes. So we have to do it together.
Yeah.
That's well said, Ron. And, you know, I think that pretty much caps it, because bottom line is, even in my Facebook post about it this week, it takes grassroots level relationships.
Mm-hmm.
And I can only deal with one person at a time. I can't necessarily bring 500 people into a relationship with. That's what was so defeating about Promise Keepers. I remember going and being at the Kingdom, and you know, the guy down there speaking said, "Turn to a black brother and give him a hug and tell him how much you love him." And I'm looking around, the section I'm in is like 500 people, and I'm the only black guy, and everybody wants to hug me. You know, and I'm like, this isn't what they're trying to accomplish here. So building those relationships are key.
So what I hear you saying, Fred, is everybody's got to do that. You can't go out and build 500 relationship with 500 people. We all need to pursue people of color coming together with Caucasians, and all of us working at it together. So thanks you guys for your time, and let's keep praying, keep thinking, keep serving, and trust the Lord will lead us to a better way and a better day.